Everybody, welcome to the show this morning, this afternoon, tonight, wherever you are dialing in from. Glad to have you with us today on this Experience League live show. And we got a great show for you today. We got great guests. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff, bringing your data and your analyses into customer journey analytics from Adobe Analytics. So we've got some awesome guests. Before that, I will just say be sure to go to experienceleague.adobe.com, your one-stop shop for everything self-help. So we've got free courses and we've got tutorials. Of course, that's where you'll find the documentation. We've got the communities there, lots of great stuff. And so definitely go to experienceleague.adobe.com to get help for any of those things. So let's do it. We've got a couple of great guests today. First, we're going to bring in Eric Matisoff. What's up? Yo, there we go. and we also have today Bryan Skelton. Oh, we got actually a big crowd there going for him. Should have had one of these maybe. All right.
My kids will appreciate that. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, great. So glad to have you guys with us today. It looks like we've got people dialing in from all over the place. That is awesome. Welcome everybody from, let me see, oh man, Prague and Ohio, California,
Love Prague.
Utah, Germany, the Gates, Good Morgen, and everywhere else. So
let's do the next one in Prague. Okay, Doug?
What's that?
We're going to do the next one in Prague.
Okay,
does that sound good
I
to you?
like that idea.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
On site. Yeah.
Yes.
Experience League live on site. Okay, we'll do it. All right. So yeah, before we jump into the topics, let's introduce you guys. Eric, why don't you start and tell us your job title and what you do all day?
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. Great to be here. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Bryan. My name is Eric Matisoff. My role at Adobe is as the global evangelist for analytics and data science. Oof, I want to go to Costa Rica too. Oh man. My role is actually, I'm not on the sales team or consulting or anything along those lines. I sit as a part of our product marketing team. And my focus is just helping to make sure that our customers are getting as much possible value out of our products as possible. So that means whether it's sharing tips and tricks or sharing roadmap items or talking about what is possible, what isn't possible, what's coming soon, what we would never consider doing, all of those kind of fun things.
Nice.
And one of them is getting to work with my buddies Doug and Bryan here to walk you through some of the latest and greatest when it comes to Adobe Analytics and customer journey analytics.
All right. There, how's that? Okay. Nice. Party. Great. Thank you, Eric. That's great. And are you going to be on Sneaks again this year at
Fingers
Summit?
crossed. I'm hoping so. You
All
know,
right.
to TBD from what I hear.
Got it. Okay. Well, great. I'm sure you'll do great things at Summit this year. Okay, and Bryan, tell us your role and what you are doing there.
Thanks, Doug. Really excited to be here with you and Eric. Bryan Skelton. I am a member of ACS, Adobe's consulting arm. Been with Adobe for a little over 8 years now, and have focused exclusively on customer journey analytics customers for the last 3 or 4 years. So really lucky, done a couple dozen implementations or been involved with most of the US-based implementations of customer journey analytics. I'm remotely based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's chilly here today, so I too would like to be in Costa Rica right now.
What's your definition of chilly, Bryan?
Yeah.
Well, it was 19 this morning when we woke up.
Okay.
All right, that's chilly. It was 16 here, but we're not. No one's keeping score.
Right.
Oh, really?
For sure, somebody could beat that.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. All right, so cool. Thanks, guys. Just real quick, we saw on the what we call the lobby as that was we're getting ready to go. That Eric, I just couldn't, I had to first ask you about your minivan, and that
Yes.
it sounds like you've embraced the minivan. Is that right?
Oh yeah, all the
Tell me
way.
why you like the minivan so much.
So I've got three kids, and they're ages 6, 4, and 10 months. And so we needed three rows. And we're looking at the like mid-size SUVs that have three rows, and they've got no trunk space. So then it was like, all right, are we going to look at a Suburban, a Tahoe, or something like that? And that just seemed insane, especially in little town America where I live, where my house was built in 1930, so they do not have room for a Suburban anywhere. And I love it because I press a button and open a door. I press another button and the kids have the heat on. I've got the air conditioning on.
Yeah,
It's fully functional, and
nice,
it's a hybrid. So I get like 38, 39 miles per gallon.
nice.
Try doing that in a Tahoe.
Yeah, well, that's great, and not to mention, room for musical gear. So when you are going to the gig, you have all your gear.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing is tons of trunk space. I
Yeah,
don't have to bring my drums with me anywhere lately, but I do have to bring kids' bikes and scooters and soccer balls and things like that. So
yeah, nice. All right,
it's nice to have that trunk space. Yeah.
cool. Okay, awesome. Bryan, we saw on there that you are a U2 freakazoid.
Wouldn't be the term I use, but yes, quite the fan.
I want to know, and you've been to many concerts. I saw that you got one coming up,
Right?
and do you go backstage and hang out with the guys?
Unfortunately, no.
What?
It's a funny story. I told my wife when we were dating, I said, if you could somehow get me to be able to meet Bono, I will marry you. And she looked into it. Didn't happen, but we got married anyway.
You did. That's
Um, but yeah, so a bunch of different shows, a couple different countries. Actually took my kids to their first U2 show over in London. And then looking forward to being in Vegas a little before the summit to see them at the Sphere in Vegas. So
cool.
looking forward to that show. And then, yeah, so hopefully I'll see some of you in Vegas as well at Summit. Got a CGA lab on tap, and look forward to share
Nice,
some more of that CGA goodness.
nice,
Amazing.
nice. Well, that's fun. Let's dive in, guys. I think we've got a lot of people here. Very excited about the topic today. I've had people reach out to me and tell me that, so that's great. So, Eric, why don't you kind of frame some of the stuff we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure. We have a lot of topics to cover, so I'm glad we're not wasting any time talking about minivans and our favorite bands. Um, Minivans and bands. That's the name of our podcast, guys.
Yeah,
Um, and so we want to talk about, first of all, data. How do we get data into CJA that was generated in Adobe Analytics? So this is your web data, your mobile app data, your digital data. How do we do it in a way that is convenient, that is accurate, that is reliable? And what are the gives and takes? What are the pros and cons with everything Adobe? Since the Omniture days and before, we've had a focus on customizability. And I personally find customizability to be like a double-edged sword. It's like great because you can be super flexible, but it also is a little challenging because it means you've got all these decisions to make along the way. And so data is our first topic. Our next topic is going to be around analyses. Um, Everyone in here has probably spent months, years, decades analyzing data within Adobe Analytics. How do we take those analyses and bring them to the world of customer journey analytics? So we want to talk a little bit with you there as well. And then the last thing is around our, especially for our administrators, how do we plan for bringing users along for the ride of, going to the tool that they've been using for, again, years, decades, maybe more, centuries, for some of our oldest customers. How do we make sure that they are migrated properly and have the right access and the right ability to succeed? So those are our three topics: data, analyses, users.
nice, nice. Okay, so data. Let's do it.
Let's talk data. I love talking data. This is why I work here. So there's a number of different things that we can do when it comes to data. There's options, as I was mentioning. There's all sorts of options that you have as an Adobe Analytics customer for how do I get my data into customer journey analytics to take advantage of all the amazing things that CJA brings our customers. That is usually one of the topics that we cover within our webinars. Usually we're talking about derived fields and data views and all these amazing and omnichannel and visit stitching and all these super cool things. But we thought, why don't we take a step back a little bit and think about what are the options for getting data from Adobe Analytics into customer journey analytics? And so there are two ways that your web data, your digital data, your mobile app data can come from Adobe Analytics if it's living in a report suite, or coming from your digital experiences into customer journey analytics. And those two ways are, number one, the analytics data connector. We internally will call it ADC, but analytics data connector. How can data from a report suite get pulled out of Adobe Analytics? Not pulled out, but like pushed into Adobe Experience Platform so that you can then analyze it in CJA. And the reason I actually corrected myself there is we're not actually removing it from Adobe Analytics. We're copying it into. So that way you can, we're talking about what the process is. You can continue to utilize Adobe Analytics for months, years, however long you need to. And what's great is for those that are ready to also analyze that data in CJA, it'll be there as well so that you can just simply perform that copy. Actually, you know what I'm realizing, Doug, is it may actually be a good time for me to share my screen, which I didn't think I was going to do until this very moment.
Okay.
So how about I do that and you let me know when it's ready for me.
Okay, give me a second here. And we're on. We're seeing your screen.
Awesome. So there's this one really nice diagram that we've been trying to keep up to date over the years called the Adobe Analytics Processing Order of Operations, something along those lines. You can get to it really quickly by going to all lowercase adobe.ly/AA processing. And I think Doug can take that URL and share it to y'all shortly as well. But when you get there, it'll bring you to this page, which has this pretty hefty diagram for you. And I like to just open it in a new tab and zoom. And this gives you a feel. And remember, this is actually getting data into Adobe Analytics. But what's really nice is understanding how that data also, where your options are for getting that data into Adobe Experience Platform. So we start all the way on the left here. You've got the Web SDK, the Mobile SDK, the Edge Network Server API. You can send that data to a data stream. You can prep it a little bit. You can also push it off to event forwarding for sending conversion APIs and all those things. Or if you have the legacy tag library, we've got that. And that goes through some pre-processing. So IP obfuscation, there it is. Processing rules, Vista rules, and marketing channel rules. And then this right here, this blue pipe, that gets you into the analytics data connector, ADC. So we're sort of we're copying that data out of the middle of the pipeline here in order to send it into Adobe Experience Platform so you can analyze it in CJA. And the reason I wanted to call that out here is there are some things in our processing pipeline within Adobe Analytics that we aren't necessarily doing, but that a lot of those things are because they're really not necessary. And because of the flexibility of what comes with data views and your best practices when it comes to setting those up in CJA that Bryan can also talk about as well. So I wanted to point out, I just wanted to pull up this this order of operations for you. I thought it could be helpful in that we've got your two options listed right here. You can have Web SDK go to a data stream or a mobile SDK or send data in through an API. It'll go to a data stream and that'll get sent. We can even munge that data a little bit. You can finagle it using data prep. you can just have that follow these purple or pink lines straight into Adobe Experience Platform. And you could skip everything that there is within Adobe Analytics. So that's option 2. That's using the Web SDK to send data directly into Adobe Experience Platform, then analyze it within CJA. The other is going through this pipeline where we can say, you know what, you can even continue to use app measurement. You can continue to use G code if you're crazy, and send that data into the Adobe Analytics processing pipes. And that will also, midway through, get copied into a data set within Experience Platform. And it'll continue to go through all the way through to data feeds, classifications, real-time reports, cross-device analytics, stitching, all that good stuff. And so that's everything I wanted to share here, Doug. So you can kind of take us back if you'd like to. But there are a few items that I thought maybe the three of us could kind of wrap on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Now,
Just to make sure that I got this right, it was adobe.ly AA processing.
yes.
Okay,
yes,
let me see if that'll go through.
All lowercase.
I know that Rudy tried to post that, but maybe it didn't come through. Let's just see.
There it is.
Hopefully that will
come
through there.
You
Adobe Y.
Adobe.
How about that? Oops. Let's try that again. Yeah, Adobe.ly AA processing. Yeah, no extra charge.
There we go.
You go. Adobe.ly AA processing. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to amplify what Eric said. It's a really important point. It's great. The analytics source connector is awesome for bringing in all that data you're used to seeing in traditional analytics, which, by the way, you can continue seeing in Adobe Analytics, right? This is not an either or. You can continue to send your data to Adobe's data collection servers, report on it in traditional Adobe Analytics, but also send it to AEP for transition time. The key difference there, that mid-values data has no persistence applied. And we'll cover that a little bit more when we talk about data views in detail. But it's extremely important to understand that everything in that Adobe data connector data, everything's like a prop. Everything in that source data set is same hit persistence, right? There is no persistence. So it's a really important concept, but we have so much power, what I call the magic of CGA and data views, where you can customize persistence. So you may have your own settings in traditional analytics, but we have just an unbelievable amount of customization that's available in CGA at the data view level.
Nice.
So we'll look at that in a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point, Brian, is that data coming out of that analytics data connector, that blue pipe we're talking about, everything is expiring on that hit by default. And then the really fun part is what you can do with it later to say, you know what, let me customize this. Let me change how it's set. Let me duplicate it and have a few different changes, all sorts of really cool options. Brian, what are you seeing your customers and your clients do with classifications as they're considering, analytics data connector, web SDK, and beyond?
Yeah. So you alluded to this, Eric. We have some customers that have been using traditional Adobe Analytics for a decade or more, right? So they've got really robust, highly customized implementations, including things like classifications. So our product and engineering teams have tried to make it easy to actually bring over those same classifications that you've worked, years in fine tuning, right? We do have the ability at the source connector level to bring over those classification files. We call them lookup data sets in AEP and CGA land. But you can seamlessly bring those over. A little bit of, Eric mentioned there's always trade-offs, right? A little bit of trade-off is those update once a week. So if you have something that's more important or refreshes more often than that, we actually have another path, right? You can create a custom data set within AEP, bring that into CGA, and update that at your own cadence. So we try and make it easy. There is a push button option. If you have more advanced needs, we have more advanced options.
Nice. Kind of an easy, a simple route that gives you some of what it might work for most people, but then you can always get a little bit more, more often there. Great. Before I let this pass by, I will also say that Bill asked for an example. Let me see, maybe we can put this up here. It'll show a little bit better. An example SDR provided by Adobe for that. Um, Bill, we are creating, and I think I'm trying to remember if we already updated the one that's in Experience League. If you search Experience League for, like SDR and BRD, we have some tutorials on just kind of what kind of things to think about when you're creating those. And we have updated those somewhat for moving through to customer journey analytics, I believe. So I'll also take a look at that and make sure that's been updated, and hopefully that'll be really helpful to you when you can download that. Otherwise, I'll get it up there. Okay, cool. We had another question here from Victor. Victor says the CJA allowed users to reproduce post-processing rules like Vista. Who wants to take that one?
So the short answer is yes. And what's impressive and powerful, and maybe we share a link if we can find one on Experience League quickly about derived fields. What's especially powerful about them in the way that we've implemented them in customer journey analytics is that they're fully retroactive. So what that means is if you've been collecting data for 6 months and today you decide, oh no, you know what? I want to, every time I'm collecting the word Bryan, I'm spelling it with an I, but I meant to collect it with a Y, which is the way that Bryan spells it. You can use a derived field to retroactively make that adjustment so that not only from today going forward will Bryan be spelled correctly, but also the last 6 months worth of data or 2 years or 10 years worth of data is fully updated as well. And that's made possible because so much of how customer journey analytics works is done by report time processing. So as soon as you make the request, we're saying, okay, run that through these rules. Those rules can include attribution settings and persistence settings, similar to those that you're used to within Attribution IQ within Adobe Analytics. But they can also include, just set this dimension to always be lowercase. Which is a big one, especially for global organizations. Think about like marketing teams that have campaigns that sometimes will have the camel case, their campaign names, or sometimes they won't. Well, you can consolidate them together and it's deduplicated and it's all lowercase. Little things like that can go a really, really long way.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and the big thing to emphasize what Eric just said, CGA is entirely a report time processing engine. So everything that we're going to show you in data views and derived fields, you literally make a change, hit save, you can go refresh in your report, and all of your data retroactively and going forward reflects that change. Super powerful.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
And that actually kind of aligns with one of the topics I wanted to discuss around data, which is marketing channels. And
before you go
Bryan,
there, let me just also tell Victor that you're right. I don't have the URL on hand, but if you go to experienceleague.adobe.com, if you go to the tutorials and go to the CJA tutorials, and then you can find, we do have some tutorials there on the derived fields, so you can take a look at those there as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, sorry, Eric, keep going.
No, perfectly fine. So within within those same report time capabilities are considerations around marketing channels, where we've got marketing channels set up in Adobe Analytics that have been set up and reasonably reliable for how many years. And you need to think about like, okay, well, I've got a new place that I'm going to be analyzing these. We're just looking at that analytics processing order of operations, the pipeline there, and we are applying marketing channel rules to that data that comes in. Now, the question is, do you want to continue to use those marketing channel rules, or do you want to expand on them or start from scratch? Bryan, I'm actually curious, you've worked on just as many CJA implementations as probably anybody.
Yeah. So when I started working with CJA customers on marketing channels, I had hair. and now that's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
As Eric alluded to, like our analytics customers have been using marketing channels for a long time, and some of them are very, 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 I don't know, very jealously guarding their marketing channel reporting. Some people actually have like business incentives tied to their Adobe Analytics marketing channel reporting. So change is hard, right? So CGA is an entirely new reporting engine. As Eric mentioned, we do have marketing channel information in the Analytics Source Connector. So seamlessly push a button, bring in your analytics data into CGA, and it'll also include some marketing channel information with some minor caveats. And those minor caveats cause some customers heartburn. The good thing is, Eric's already talked about, right? So, our product team over the last, years as we've been developing CGA, they realized there's some gaps here and there. So they made this thing called derived fields, and that is like the super glue of CGA, right? If you need to fix something, typically derived fields is your answer, right? So Web SDK data collection, right, bypasses that whole analytics processing engine, goes right into AEP. What happens with marketing channels, right? Because marketing channels was an Adobe Analytics only construct. We're going Web SDK right to AEP. What about my marketing channels? Somebody could get killed if I don't have my marketing channel data. So we've created that capability within derived fields. We actually provide a template within the derived field library to help you recreate that marketing channel reporting. Again, some caveats because they're different processing engines. We don't have some of that post-processing that you typically get in traditional analytics reporting. But again, much more powerful because it's on the fly and totally customizable. So there's been some bruises, Eric, in dealing with marketing channels with different customers. But again, super excited about derived fields and the possibilities it offers, because no longer you're limited to the way that Adobe out of thin air came up with marketing channels, 10 years ago. And that's the way marketing channels have always worked and will always work. Now you have some more flexibility within CGA and derived fields.
Nice. Here, my favorite part about it is the amount of time I used to spend debugging marketing channels in Adobe Analytics it feels infinite. You would start by saying like, oh, you know what, this one thing seems off. And then you would break it down, you would correlate, you'd subrelate, you'd segment, you'd kind of figure, hey, you know what? Okay, we've got a problem. And then you dig into the rules and you say, okay, well, the rules look right. What's going on here? And then you export a data feed from a day. And then, that's the reason Doug has the most hair out of us. I'm like in the middle with still some remaining. And Bryan has spent the most time consulting, which is why he's got the least. And we're in order here. But the whole point is, it's so much easier to do that debugging within CJA because you can just make the switch and see instantly what the changes were. You can instantly see, okay, did that fix the problem or did that cause a new problem? And there's a question around when you make these retroactive changes from FS here, Doug. I don't know if you want to throw that up on the screen. Yeah. Will that change any reporting that included previous input? And the answer is yes. When not to be Uncle Ben, but with great power comes great responsibility. And yeah. Uncle Ben, right? Yeah, I'm not going crazy. Yeah. Uncle Ben. Mm-hmm. And so that's really key when it comes to making these tweaks, when it comes to marketing channels and the rules that define them, is what I like to do. And Bryan, I would bet you have done it a bunch too, is I actually duplicate it first, test out my changes so I can know, okay, did it pass my QA? It's just like QAing of tags. But the advantage is if you break something, you just delete it. It's gone. Right. So you can so I really like to duplicate and then edit, find my solution, and then bring that back to the original value.
Yeah. Great power, like you said, in CGA, the ability to change that in a data view, which is a virtual thing, hit refresh, see if it fixed it. Now, in traditional analytics, your option is like to reset all those channels, and then you're starting basically from scratch, right? So then, you've got marketing channel data from that change, right? This applies totally retroactively, so it is really
Nice.
powerful.
Cool. Right
So
on.
let's see. I don't know if we want to dig any deeper on maybe our last topic with data or kind of move on. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Bryan, did you want to do something with connections at all?
Yeah, we can talk about connections next. I'll go ahead and share my
Or we can
screen.
take a couple of minutes. I think we have time for a couple of minutes there.
All
Great,
right.
let's do it.
All
There is
right.
a question. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that while I'm starting to share my screen.
Okay,
Sure.
let's see. It might be above my head. Let me see what we got there. Is there any timeline to have something like advertising analytics in CJA? Or can you bring your G360 advertising data in as a data stream?
So yeah, we are looking at all different ways of connecting data from non-Adobe systems and non-first party systems into Adobe Experience Platform for analysis in CJA. And that includes data like advertising data. The fun challenge, of course, is that big old thing called cookies and identities and stuff like that. We want to make sure that as you're pulling data out of paid search publishers or social media publishers or display media publishers, etc., that you're able to link it properly. And if you're not able to link it properly, at least similar to how we do advertising analytics in Adobe Analytics, we can align it as best we can. And so we're toying around with a number of different ways of, number one, getting that data out of those systems. The really fun thing about Adobe Experience Platform is we're no longer thinking about just analytics. We're also thinking about activation through real-time CDP. We're also thinking about delivering personalized messaging through Adobe Journey Optimizer. And we're also thinking about mix modeling, so how we can plan a scenario and for our costs. And that last one is the one that really gets me excited for this topic, because you can't do mix modeling if you're only limiting your data sources to those data sources that have an identity. And so I'm not giving you a full answer there, Liana, but I think you can kind of like read between the lines a little bit around how we're thinking and how we want to make sure that you feel confident with the data you're pulling in and that it's integrated to the best of your and our abilities.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, let's jump over to Bryan's screen.
Great. Thanks, Doug.
What do you want to show there, Bryan?
Yeah, so customer journey analytics.
Currently, we're seeing on your screen. Let me see. There we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Within, internally, we often refer to CGA, customer journey analytics, as workspace on platform, right? Because if those of you who have seen CGA or had access to it or had a demo, the interface looks exactly like traditional analytics, right? That workspace interface goes across both tools. The difference is with CGA, the analytics data, right, went off into those Adobe servers and you never saw it, right? Within customer journey analytics, workspace on platform, all the data exists in platform first, right? So we make it super easy, whole bunch of different connectors, easy ways to get data into AEP, right? You could click push a button, get access to your report suite data, and have that start flowing into Adobe Experience Platform, right? These data sets. So your analysts aren't ever going to need this or use this or even access this, but it's really important for you as the CG expert in your organization to understand where this data comes from. So, CGA doesn't, I often get questions from customers, hey, how come, how did CGA change this data or what they do? How come this data, CGA didn't do anything, right? It reads what comes into platform and reports on that. And to tie into the last question that came in, you can certainly bring in GA360 data or any data, right? You can bring in your health data off your watch. Eric has, tracked his, your soccer league. There's all different things, right? CGA is very agnostic, right? So yes, it's optimized obviously for digital data, but you can bring in anything as long as it has a person ID and a timestamp. Works better when it correlates to other sources with the same identifiers. But anyway, we can bring in this data into AEP. I often like to go ahead and take a look at the data, right? So again, this is more an administrator view. where you're actually looking at the underlying data. This is something you couldn't do in traditional analytics. What you're about to see here, we're going to preview the last batch of data that came into AEP from an Adobe Analytics report suite. This is actually for our Adobe Store swag, if you ever want to get some extra stuff. But we can go ahead and see, actually, again, we're previewing the last 99 rows of the most recent batch, but you can actually see the values in here. You can preview the schema and see what type of, schema value this is, whether or not it's a string or a number. That determines whether or not it's a dimension or a metric. And all that just makes it really easy to preview what data you're going to see in CGA. And actually, you can actually edit this information, right? So AEP, you have access to this. You can run Data Distiller on this. You can edit it on the way into AEP with our data prep functionality, not having to use Vista rules or engage the Adobe engineering teams and pay all that extra money to edit your analytics data. Much easier to do that now in Customer Journey Analytics. This all comes together. I'm now looking at the CGA interface right now. This is, again, an administrator view. I can see this connection tab and this data view tab. Your normal analysts will only see the workspace and components menus. They won't see this, but it's important, again, to understand how all this data comes together. So if I'm making a connection, right, I can see that this connection here is actually made up of two different data sets, right? So no longer are we looking at single channel data like in traditional analytics, where maybe you combined your web and app data, right? We can bring in all sorts of data, including other Adobe app services like Adobe Journey Optimizer. We can bring in call center data. We can bring in point of sale, right? All that offline data. All that information can be unioned together in a CGA connection, right? That concept is super important. Unioning, right? So all the data sets that are in a connection make up one new big super wide table. So every column in all those data sets gets added to every possible row. And that's where then persistence comes into play, right? You could have an action or an activity in your call center that actually applies or gets attributed to something that happens later on in your web data if those IDs match, right? That person ID matches. So data comes from AEP, gets unioned together in a CGA connection. And then, we'll talk a little bit more about data views in a while, but data views are the virtual settings on top of connections. Quick reminder here, I like to be conservative with connections, liberal with data views. Connections are hard copies of data. That's what we actually bill you against, all the data that's in your connections. So even though it's very much a push button interface, I do wish there was a little bit more of a, I don't know how to say this, an idiot filter on this, because you can actually do some things in here that have import in terms of how long data takes to read backfill or things like that. So be careful with your connections. Make as many changes as you can in your data views.
It's a good tip. Conservative with connections, and liberal with your data views.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Before we move on, maybe last thing, and then we need to move on to data views. I just wanted to. I know there's a lot more we could talk about for each of these sections, but I just wanted to chat with you guys for 1 second about Arun's questions about validation, right? It's a little harder, right, with CJA, and we think we need to, it was so easy to just like use the debugger or whatever for stuff coming through to Adobe Analytics. What do you have for tips or something regarding validation debugging?
I'll go first, Eric, and then you can add on. So,
I've only got 5 things to say. Don't worry.
Right. So CGA, the data doesn't come directly to CGA. The data goes to AEP, right? So you do a lot of your validation within AEP, right? So here I'm doing some validation. I'm seeing what types of values are coming into each of these fields. Not only that, there is the ability within AEP to run a query on that underlying data set, right? right? That's something you could never do in traditional analytics. Once that data was in there, the only way you could see it is in the workspace interface. Now we actually allow you to run SQL to, again, validate your data. So even with CGA, you get some basic abilities to validate data using query service, some more advanced capabilities with the data distiller product. And then, Eric, I don't know if you want to maybe talk about what folks do with Web SDK.
Yeah, absolutely.
Want me
So
to switch
there's a
over to
number of things
yours?
to discuss. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Let me know once I'm sharing here. So I just pulled up
Okay, we got you.
adobestore.com. Awesome. So adobestore.com is feeding data from the Web SDK into that data set that Bryan was just sharing. And here's like my number one tip for using the network tab within your browser. I use Microsoft Edge, but it's Chromium, so it'll work the same within Chrome as well. When you select your request here and go into payload, a lot of people just kind of click, 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 and it takes forever. I'm a really big fan. I've been talking about right clicking, it seems like my entire career at Adobe, but this is another chance to talk about right clicking. So if you right click here and just hit expand recursively, bada bing, bada boom, you got everything you need. Every single object and array is opened here right for you within the event that you're trying to analyze and trying to debug. I'm also a really big fan of the Adobe Experience Platform Debugger. There's some really nice things you can do around the edge logs feature. I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably not logged in here would be my guess, just knowing myself. So I don't, yeah. Um, but there's some really nice capabilities around not only seeing the data that is being sent from the client, which is what we're seeing here in network, but if you log in and connect with the edge logs, you can also see how data prep is affecting your data collection as well. So the very last thing I'll mention around this topic around debugging is um, the really nice thing about customer journey analytics as well is you have access to identities. So if I were to pull in a blank panel here and just say, you know what, page URL and look at identity, I can actually see every little ECID identifier that is being used. And imagine if obviously I have my ECID memorized. What I could do from a debugging standpoint is, I could actually see exactly how just for me, all of my events are being captured in customer journey analytics. And I can do that with any type of visualization, of course, because that filter is applied to the whole panel. So I could look at flow or fallout or beyond. And so I think that's a really nice way to have like multiple levels of debugging, which I'm a big fan of. So you've got debugging from the client within the network tab over yonder. And again, right click, expand recursively, and you're going to be saving some time there. You've also got, if you're using data prep to munge that data a little bit before it gets fully ingested, then you've got those edge logs. And then you can also, once that data gets into CJA, you can also filter based on just your own ECID. You could even create your own data view, which is a perfect segue into our next topic
Yeah.
that is aligned with your ECID or your staging environment or something along those lines.
Nice.
So one thing, as Eric transitions into data views, that he kind of glossed over, CGA gives you row level access to every hit or event in all your event data sets. No unique succeeded. You could filter down, as Eric just showed you, to any dimension value, any high cardinality dimension. You actually have row level detail to every single dimension value, both for filtering, what we call segmentation in CGA, and reporting, right? So you can drill down
That's
as,
so
as
huge.
as narrow as you want. That's a huge.
Yeah.
I came from the client side, and that was that was always such a pain, right? After the
Yeah.
third or fourth day of the month, we had unique succeeded in our reports. Right now,
Yeah.
you no longer have to worry about that.
That is awesome. That's awesome, guys. Yeah, we definitely have to
Look
move
how
on.
fast we got that data
Let's
there.
go.
Yeah,
Let's move on to talking about some data views tips. Uh, yeah,
great. Yeah, thanks, Doug. Am I still sharing my
you
screen?
are. Yeah,
I don't need to be.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
you are.
I can stop sharing. We can have a little fun little conversation then.
Oh, okay. We'll go back to conversation mode. There we are.
Conversation mode.
Hey, how's it going?
Um,
Yeah.
so one of the really interesting things around data views. So data views, I like to think of them as connections is how data gets into CJA, similar to like your report suites. Data comes into report suites in Adobe Analytics, but then you have this additional filter and level of customizability that you can apply to that data after the fact. And that's where all that report time processing that we're talking about comes into play. And that's within data views. It's kind of akin to a virtual report suite in Adobe Analytics, but as the entire tech world likes to say, it's like virtual report suites on steroids. You've got all these way more powerful things that you can do within customer journey analytics within a data view that you couldn't do within a virtual report suite. And one of the things I've become a really big fan of, Bryan and I were talking about earlier, is around using virtual report suites as a means for governance, not virtual report suites, using data views as a means for governance. And it's actually something that we recommended within virtual report suites in Adobe Analytics as well. It was, you know what, if you want to give access to your paid search agency or your digital agency access to a slice of data, you apply a segment and then give them access to just that virtual report suite, then they can go to town and they won't have access to your full set of data. You can do the same thing in data views, but you've got way more power, way more flexibility, and more control over what they can see. You can limit the components they have access to. You can set unique attribution and persistence settings, and more. Um, Bryan, I don't know if there's anything else on top of that around governance that you wanted to add in as users
Yeah,
are kind of making
yeah,
that migration.
yeah. So, Doug, if you want to let me share again,
Okay. Okay.
we're the key thing. So you have the component level governance of a data view. You can remove as many components as you want. You can make customized settings however you want. But then once you're in the admin console here, right, I'm showing some product profiles for customer journey analytics. CJ is managed in the Adobe admin console, fortunately, unfortunately, depending on your opinion. And we have the ability within each of these product profiles in permissions, right? The data views is an area that you can choose to give access to for that product profile. So product profiles can include people and or user groups, right? So if you're conservative your connection, put all the data in it. You make a data view that limits it down to certain components or types of data via filters. And then on top of that, right, you can choose to actually add all auto include, for your power users, every data view, or specifically include only a particular data view. Then it doesn't matter what data is in your connection. Call center data could be in there, but if that data view that this person is enabled to see, or this user group is enabled to see, if that doesn't give you permission in the data view to see what's in the connection, it doesn't exist for them. All they can see is what's enabled at the data view level. And then this additional level of governance at the product profile level gives you that more fine-grained control over who sees what.
Yep, big time. I don't want to spend our entire time talking about why
Yeah.
data views are great. Well, that's for another conversation.
Yeah. We're running out of
Um,
time a little bit, but keep going.
and so I wanted to just kind of quickly review just a few best practices or ideas that we've seen customers utilize data view customizations and derived fields for. And they are marketing channels, which we've already discussed, dimension cleanup, which we've kind of touched upon. But if you've got page names that are messy and need to be cleaned up, that's a great way to clean them up. Bucketing of regions, link types,
Yeah.
page types, all of
Bucketing.
that good stuff. Bryan had this great one around dataset friendly names. It's like very simple. Dataset IDs come in, which is this crazy long alphanumeric code that Bryan memorizes, but no one else does. And so you can basically apply a classification to those data set IDs. And
Mhm.
then the last one, Bryan, I don't know if you had any like best practices around attribution settings or persistence settings for referrers and marketing channels, and like how you're seeing customers consider those.
Yeah, so I think the product managers made a opinionated effort on this, right? So we don't automatically bring over all of your analytics settings, right? Because we realize this is a new world within customer journey analytics. Now you have the ability for each of these dimensions to go in and set custom persistence, right? Again, at a default, it's all same hit. There is no persistence, but you could easily change that to all of the allocation and expiration options that we have, including some more advanced look back windows within CGA. So we don't automatically copy things over because it may not make as much sense in a new world where you have multiple channels, right? You may want to customize how much you persist a marketing channel, or whether or not a referrer should impact attribution for a call center or point of sale transaction. So all of these are able to be set to the same level that you had in traditional analytics, but by default, they are, as we mentioned, same hit persistence. So you have to customize them if you want them to act exactly like Adobe Analytics, or you may want to take this option, particularly as we talk about other migration efforts, to make more informed decisions about how you do that. I know, Eric, you had that one example around refer that you wanted to share. I forgot
Yeah,
or else I
just that's okay. The since refer comes in also hit based, you
right.
want to set it to be. We've got some options around first known and last known that are specifically referring to refer. So keep an eye out there, because the way the Web SDK works is every single hit has the referring URL in it. So you're not going to want to know that you're not going to want to set that and think like, oh, there's all these internal refers. No, in reality, it's just we're sending it on every hit. So you want to set the data view to have the persistence of first known, for example, within that session. So
Very cool.
some kind of key things to keep an eye on.
That's a good tip. I
Um,
like that one. I like that one.
we've talked about data. We've talked about users as well, around some of that governance that Bryan was sharing.
I got them.
The very last one, and maybe like we take 2 or 3 minutes, Bryan,
Yeah.
to kind of walk through how you're seeing customers and what you're doing with migrating projects from core Adobe Analytics within Workspace over to CJA, and what some of the kind of cool things you've seen folks do along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, really excited about this product feature that only became available second half of the year, right? So, we have a lot of analytics customers, and we hope that they eventually are going to enjoy customer journey analytics. So we're trying to remove some of the friction, right? Because again, you may have 10 years worth of workspaces and calculated metrics and segments, right? To make that
Centuries,
easier, there's what'd you say? Date ranges, yes. Um,
centuries of data. Yeah.
Centuries of data. Yeah.
So we have a new tool. If you're an Adobe Analytics admin, you can go to Component Migration and have access to your projects and choose to migrate them. When you enable this flow and go through this, right? So I'm going to set myself as the owner. You can set somebody else as the owner. And then I want to choose my destination data view, right? So there's all the different ones that are available. And then you have this map schema, and this actually gets remembered. So it makes it easier to move over multiple reports later. If there is a segment or calculated metric within your project, it actually goes ahead and includes that information as part of the what you're migrating. So even let me see if I can find that project real fast. Well, anyone that you're moving. Let's see if I've got migrate. I don't know where I put it. But if there is again, segment or calculated metric included in that project, this is part of what gets it moved over. So every component in the tables, as well as any segments or calculated metrics that are applied, get moved over, so that in CGA, you will then have a exact duplicate of that project available with the segments and calculated metrics applied. Now there is, a process where you have to map things, and sometimes there are some components that don't exist, right? So CGA doesn't have an equivalent of, page hit depth, for example. But you could apply a catch-all or any sort of derived field, right, to use as the way you want to map that, so that then this mapping process will complete and the project will migrate, and it takes, again, just a couple of seconds. So for elements that don't exist in CGA, recommend going ahead and creating a catch-all that you can then go to the destination project in CGA and edit it there. You could remove it out or replace it with something else.
Yeah. And just,
Love it.
I'll just kind of add, yeah, I have a couple of tutorials of videos on Experience League that I'm updating right now, because they say actually if you're moving your calculated metrics and your segments over to CJA, that you just basically have to recreate them. And that is no longer true because of this, right? So I'm actually updating that. So if you watch my video in the next week, then don't be alarmed that you'd have to recreate everything still, but rather that we now have this option. And just to be clear, like as Bryan was talking about, that your segments and your calculated metrics have to be included in the project, like on the screen, in a table, in a visualization, or they won't come over. If you have a bunch of calculated metrics or segments that you want to bring over, and they're not applied to a table or whatever, just make a table in Analytics and Adobe Analytics, put them in there, just pop them in before you actually migrate, and then they'll come over and you'll have them. Because if you don't add them, if they're just sitting in the left rail still, they won't come over as you migrate the project. I know we've got a bunch of questions that have come through. I will say that, since we didn't get to all the questions, you guys, I will put, I'm going to put a community discussion up, in the analytics community. So give me a day or two and we will answer all of your questions there. I will put a link to that, since I haven't created it yet. I'll put a link to that back here on this same page. So if you come back to this YouTube page, I'll put a link to the community discussion, and we'll answer all of your questions there so that you don't get left behind on those. And if you have more questions about that, you can put them in there as well, and we'll answer those even if you have questions after this. So I'm sorry again that we didn't get to all of the questions, but we will. So thank you so much for joining. Before we leave, we got one quick minute, Bryan, for our last segment. We have to do it. Here it is. Wait for it. Ah! Wait, I'm sorry.
Oh no.
It went real quick.
Here it is.
Spend some time traveling.
My goodness. Sorry, start
we're
over, Bryan. Here we go. Go ahead.
So those of you that spend some time traveling, whether it's for work or pleasure, my initial tip was going to be, hey, bring a binder clip or use your hanger in the hotel closet to make sure your blinds are closed. But somebody already gave that tip. I can't believe it.
Yeah,
so my second tip is have a little bit of black tape or some little black stickies to cover up all those various doodad lights, right? The coffee maker, the thermostat, the TV remote, the TV, all have these little bright buttons, and your room is as bright as the moon sometimes when you're trying to go to sleep in a hotel. But bring that tape, cover those up, and you'll get a better night's sleep, and you could do all the special things you're supposed to do on your trip.
That's a great
one. Maybe in Vegas.
Hopefully in
Vegas.
I love it. Okay, awesome. Good, unrelated, cool tip. Appreciate that, Bryan. Well, Eric, Bryan, thank you guys so much for being here today, going through these things. I know that this will be really helpful to our customers as they move their data and analyses over to CJA. And again, everybody, thanks to everybody that came, and for everybody that's watching this afterwards as well. We'll be putting this up on Experience League as well. So thanks for joining us, and until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Bryan. Thanks, y'all.
Take care.